The Avengers. The culmination of years of successful movies. The Avengers are a superhero team based on the popular Marvel Comics characters, and is one of the highest grossing films of all time. I'm sure you've seen it. But today we're asking, what if the characters, oh so recognizable, were played by different actors, or in most cases, actresses? Call it an experiment, but we're gender flipping some of the biggest movies and recasting them, and seeing how it would affect the story if it even would at all. Let's start simple enough with Thor. Chris Hemsworth is 31 years old. He was on a popular Australian soap opera series for 185 episodes, but other than that, nothing really notable on television. His debut film role was 2009's Star Trek as George Kirk, Chris Pine's father. After the independent cash and moving up a bit with the not-quite box office thriller A Perfect Getaway, he luckily enough landed the role of Thor, which has undoubtedly been his biggest break so far. For the role of Thor, we wanted a woman who was taller than the average female, who could project strength with a bit of musculature. For a brief while, Jennifer Lawrence was on the table, having done a number of independents and even playing Mystique in X-Men First Class. Her career at the time was comparable to Hemsworth's. She would beef up for the role definitely, but I could see her wielding Mjolnir and riding the fine line of bold, lovable, and dumb to Earth's ways. But she's young. Only 24, and would have been about 20 when approached for Thor. I landed on Rachel Nichols. She's 5'10", a natural blonde with some action chops as Scarlet from G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra, and the leading damsel in distress in 2011's Conan the Barbarian. And she even starred as the lead in Showcase's Continuum, so the fantasy sci-fi genre with an edge is right up her alley. Again, she would need to beef up for the role, but at 34, her similar age to Hemsworth gives her an advantage over Lawrence in securing a warrior look. It would have been risky, but from 2011, Rachel Nichols could have been Thor. The character of Tony Stark is a lot of things. It's playboy, it's scientist, it's smooth talker, wisecracker, confidence in a mecha suit. Am I the only one who can see Queen Latifah? People were honestly worried when Robert Downey Jr. was tapped back in 2008, so to cast a woman for the role in Avengers, that means we're retroactively casting them in the original Iron Man series. 2008 was the turning point for Robert Downey Jr. with Iron Man, Tropic Thunder, and soon enough Sherlock Holmes. The rest is history. But before he donned the suit, he was in 2007's Zodiac, which was well received and made money, but going back into the early 2000s, he either wasn't the main lead, the film didn't make money, or was a downright flop. Some considerations were Marissa Tomei, Meg Ryan, but neither of them had a career at that time that compared to Downey. But my first thought before even scouting was Reese Witherspoon. She's only in her late 30s, and that's a bit younger than I'd like, but her spot in 2007's rendition and mark as a leading lady back to the early 2000s, save for the reception of it all, make that era of her career successful enough for her to try something as bold and new as a superhero was for Downey Jr. Still, I just wasn't sold. My pick for Iron Man is Sandra Bullock. Well, it's not my primary concern. She's a very similar age and also a brunette. Forget what you saw in Gravity, and forget about Miss Congeniality. She can do it, and what's more, her career from 2000 on was filled with main leads and good box office returns, making her more qualified than Downey Jr. at that time. I do think she could pull off the character of Tony Stark in the ways that mattered, just with perhaps a feminine spin. Pepper Potts, the supportive, always there, loyal assistant, and soon romantic interest. We were looking for a man with a career somewhat similar in trajectory to Gwyneth Paltrow. Warming up for Iron Man, let's start in 2003 with View from the Top. It was a box office flop. 2005's Proof was another financial disappointment. Infamous made even less than that. There was The Good Night, decent cast but poorly received and made even less money. Whew, you're gonna hate me, but I'm feeling wild. I'm giving the spot to Rupert Everett. Again, this is retroactively casting him in 2008. With some movie magic, he was easily tall and handsome enough to play the responsible and supportive employee. Career-wise, at that time, he was doing a bit overseas that wasn't too overwhelming, and voiced Prince Charming in the Shrek movies. He is 5 years older than Sandra Bullock. But at 55 in 2015, you would be placing a lot of faith in makeup. But if they wanted to do it, they could've. I'm leaving this one open. I may change my mind. Samuel L. Jackson has been very enjoyable as Nick Fury. The trick here is finding a mature black woman, we're maintaining race here, who can carry the authority, the maturity, and the occasional wisecracks. Alfre Woodard would be flattered, but she's only 5'3", and lacks the muscle structure Samuel Jackson at least pretended to have. Easily, I'm giving this to Viola Davis, who has already been tapped for Suicide Squad, DC's answer to Guardians of the Galaxy. They know she can pull it off. Anyone who's actually watched past the first episode of How to Get Away with Murder knows she can bring the intensity needed to whip these heroes into shape. Just throw an eye patch on her and call it a day. Captain America isn't the first Marvel superhero Chris Evans played before. Both of the millennial Fantastic Four movies saw him as the Human Torch. You might remember him from 2001's Not Another Teen movie, the box office success Cellular from 2004, the Fantastic Four movies, and the pseudo-superhero adventure somewhat disappointing Push in 2009. But between all of these were nearly unheard of or otherwise small-ticket films that didn't do much for his career. Everyone's got him. The name I keep hearing is Evan Rachel Wood. The North Carolina-born actress has the American quality to her, could beef up if needed, and could be patriotically intimidating. However, I have something different in mind. The woman I want for Captain America is Rachel McAdams. Just some of her notables are of course Wedding Crashers, Red Eye, and Sherlock Holmes 1 and 2. All except the Sherlock sequel were pre-Captain America. She was on the map enough, but she would face challenges. For one, she's Canadian, and that matters to some people. We're not casting Captain Canada here. Another is that she's only 5'4". That's on the shorter end. She looks like the scrawny Chris Evans from before he even went through the Hunkatron. She would be even shorter than the other actresses cast, but I still think it could work. She would embody different elements of Captain America than just the brawny, tall muscle image of strength we're used to. Instead, she would be more acrobatic, fitting someone who is smaller and thinner. In case you didn't know, the first woman in history to qualify for Mount Midoriyama on American Ninja Warrior was actually pretty short, at only 4'11", and had gymnastic muscles over bulky ones. McAdams would look phenomenal in that mask. Her smile captures the optimism, the spunky can-do attitude of America, and that lends itself to the modest, charming, and occasionally naive parts of Captain America too. A gender swap of this role does carry some historical weight though, but even in that time period, Rogers being selected for the procedure that would give her those awesome pecs isn't too out of the box. Let's face it, Tom Hiddleston wasn't a poster on anyone's wall before he was cast as Loki in 2011's Thor. Acting in several films overseas and becoming a familiar face on BBC, he was actually invited to audition for Thor by Kenneth Branagh, whom he'd worked with on Wallanders, but we'll forgive that unique connection. We're shooting for an actress who can play the role, a similar age, and that's that. As fate would have it, we have Rose Byrne as Loki. With a longer, more prolific career pre-2011, the Australian-born actress has the perfect villain voice up her sleeve, and being just a year older than Nichols, has the sister who'd never be queen in her back pocket. The Hulk! This is interesting because we're really looking at a woman to play Bruce Banner, portrayed in Avengers by Mark Ruffalo. Every theatrical version has had the Hulk's model loosely based on the face of the actor. Inspired a bit by the Edward Norton direction, I went for Maggie Gyllenhaal. Hear me out. She can play quiet scientist, calculating risk taker, but a Hulk based on her face? The common response I got was that she didn't look threatening when angry or too cute to be intimidating. I felt differently, like a hyper-muscular green version of her, likely with shorter hair, could work for the beastly unrestrained parts of the Hulk, undeniably female without being a beauty queen. Now to be clear, I'm not talking about She-Hulk. I mean something more based on the classic Hulk's design, with of course a chest covering of some kind. And to all you thinking it, yes, I've seen female bodybuilders and all the ignorant things said about them by people who fail to realize that even men don't look healthy when they do this, and sometimes it's not even about health, like certain plastic surgery people you love to feel sorry for, but I'm getting off topic. Her Bruce Banner really feels like there's an inner darkness behind that shy demeanor. It's a risk, but so were all the other Hulks. Agent Coulson. Smooth, competent, a sense of humor about what he does, with a bit of a geeky side. Portrayed by Clark Gregg and popping up all over the Marvel Universe, including Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and even Ultimate Spider-Man. Clark is a 52-year-old actor from Boston, Massachusetts, who other than Agent Coulson is primarily identified as Christine's ex-husband from the Emmy-winning 5-year run of New Adventures of Old Christine. Okay, so a sitcom star. The powers that be determine our new Agent Coulson is Jane Levy's. Yes, that's Daphne from Frasier. While she has had a larger career and Frasier was much more popular than Old Christine, it was also a long time ago, putting her at about the same place Clark Gregg was, especially in 2008. She's 1 year older than Gregg, and at 5'10", is actually the same height as our tallest superheroine, Thor. She can appear competent as an experienced agent, make some wisecracks if needed, and fangirl out. It's a fair enough swap that might have even done them better. And lastly, we have Black Widow. Extremely capable, deadly, stoic, and sexy, played by Scarlett Johansson and first appearing in Iron Man 2 as her Marvel debut. The roles have cemented Johansson as one of the premier actresses in Hollywood, taking her from a maybe to a must. Some considerations were Joseph Gordon-Levitt, primarily because he could pull off the emotion, or lack thereof, in the character, and can get in shape as seen in his self-produced Don John. But there wasn't a consensus on his look. It wasn't quite right, and his career and visibility at the time wasn't comparable to Scarlett's. Heading in the sexier direction, some options pitched that were quickly passed over were Zac Efron, who didn't have the broad sex appeal to women at the time that Johansson had to men, Taylor Lautner, who would have been 18 when he took the role, a bit too young. There was Anton Yelchin, whom you may know from 2009 Star Trek, and literally 2 weeks later, Terminator Salvation. That was weird. But before those, in 2008, his career and visibility was not comparable to Scarlett. He had appeared in 2006's Alpha Dog, where he was swallowed by a more popular cast, and as the lead in Charlie Bartlett, but that was a box office flop. So who am I going to cast as Black Widow? None other than Rupert Grint! I am dead serious, Ron Weasley from the Harry Potter series. Having starred pretty fairly in 8 blockbusters easily gives him visibility. Like most young actors, he could beef up to a 6-pack, and he's a redhead. While he does have a goofy smile, smiling is not something Black Widow, perhaps Black Widower, ever needs to do. It's been proven, women find men who are mysterious and under-emotional sexy. It worked for this guy. But the problem is, while I could see him as Black Widow now, I have to consider him back in 2010. He would have been 21 to Johansson's 25, and even though nothing comes of it, Tony Stark does flirt with Black Widow a bit. So am I saying that Sandra Bullock would hit on Ron Weasley? That is problematic, but focusing on the characters rather than the actors in this case does us justice. This also brings up the chemistry between McAdams and Grint. So it's true, there are other choices and I'd love to hear them, but Grint shouldn't be overlooked. Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye. He barely did or even said much in the first Avengers movie. Recasting him, although necessary, is almost a pointless exercise. I'm leaving this role specifically up to the viewers, and I may do that from time to time, no more than once an episode. Who's the heroine Hawkeye? Leave your comments.